Hey everybody, welcome again to F This Movie, the official podcast of fthismovie.com, movie love for movie lovers. My name is Patrick Bromley, and I'm super excited for this week's show because I'm joined by a very special guest. He is the co-host of the Pure Cinema podcast, the host of the Just the Discs podcast and YouTube channel, Quentin Tarantino's BFF, and returning champion at F This Movie, my friend Brian Sauer. Hi, Brian.
Hello, sir. I am super excited, too, and definitely not Quentin's BFF, but that's very kind of you to say.
You're in the top 5. You're like in his MySpace top 5.
Maybe. We'll see.
I just have to find his MySpace page to confirm this.
I'm sure he's got one.
Well, you are a very busy man these days, sir, because the New Beverly has just reopened. You guys just dropped your first calendar show in over a year. Just the Discs, it has to be blowing up because everybody's doing their halfway to Black Friday sales and extravaganzas. So you have a lot on your plate. So I really appreciate you making time to come back to this show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, sir. I have been trying to cut back a little bit on this sort of thing, but you know, when you asked, it's you, and I could not say no. I absolutely always enjoy coming on to talk movies with you, and this is a really fun topic. So I'm very excited to talk about these.
Yes, speaking of the topic, so a couple years ago, I guess it was 2018, which I can't believe it was that long ago, we did a show on Underrated 88 to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It was in conjunction with the Rupert Pupkin Speaks blog that you run, because you were doing your Underrated 88 series. So then we were trying to think of a topic to do for this episode, and I thought, well, let's just steal that same idea and go back 30 years and do Underrated 91. So that's the topic for this week's show. We each pick 5 movies from 1991 that we think are overlooked or underappreciated, and we're going to talk about them.
Yeah, no, this is fun. I have the one thing that has taken a hit amidst all the podcasting and YouTubing is the Rupert Pupkin Speaks. I haven't been doing as many of the lists over there, regretfully. So there hasn't been an actual Underrated 91 series, but I'm happy to represent it for what it's worth in this episode. You know?
Nice. Well, you are the guest, so I will let you go first with your first pick of an underrated movie from 91.
Okay. Gonna embarrass myself right out of the gate.
Oh, you're doing that one first?
Yeah, that's got to be my number 5 spot.
Okay.
It is Mannequin 2 on the Move, or just Mannequin on the Move, I think, if you're being exactly correct about the title. And I told you this in text, but I think this is my preferred Mannequin film. And I've actually made a list of reasons why, because I really do feel like I have to defend this choice. And I will say, even from the beginning, as with Caddyshack 2 versus Caddyshack, I prefer the theme song of the second film to the first.
I'm with you.
So that happens with this. Okay, I'm just going to run through my little list here. I mean, we know what the Mannequins movies are. You know, you've got some princess that is cursed and made into a mannequin. In the case of the first film, it's Kim Cattrall, and she's like an Egyptian princess. And in the case of Mannequin 2, it is Kristy Swanson, and she is like a medieval times kind of princess. And so, like, between the two of them, yes, I got to give the edge to Kim Cattrall, if I'm being honest. But William Ragsdale is, I think, my preferred actor of the two between him and Andrew McCarthy. I just really love William Ragsdale. From Fright Night to Herman's Head to some of his other film roles, I've really sort of come around to him. And I'll say this without being too negative, I've started to back away from Andrew McCarthy a little bit as I've gotten older. I mean, he's a good actor, but for whatever reason, I'm finding myself identifying with him a little less and less these days. So I don't miss him in this movie, and I just like William Ragsdale's energy. You know, he's a little bit more screwball. He's a little less of a sad sack, and that's partially a writing thing too. But the thing, one of the things I like about this movie is that it skips over, because it's a sequel, it does have the initial setup of Mannequin. You have a medieval, you know, I guess, sort of interaction at the beginning with an evil Terry Kaiser. And we were talking about Terry Kaiser and his mole hair. And and he is, to me, he's like one of the few actors that I'm okay. I'll sort of be fine with him going big and kind of maniacal, and it's like it's a pleasurable thing to watch. Like it doesn't bother me, whereas some actors that try to do what he does in this movie, it would be too much. But for some reason that helps the movie. But back to Andrew McCarthy, I like that this movie, because we've already established what these are, you skip over that whole, like I said, sort of sad sack business of like how pathetic he is and McCarthy is in that movie, and how he's really up against it and desperate and needs to have a successful window, design or whatever. And so like that stuff is like my least favorite stuff in Mannequin. Like I get that it's setting up the character, but that's one of the reasons I kind of like sequels, is because you can kind of skip that crap. And so like this movie just goes right by that and kind of gets right into it. And I also like the fact that Meshach Taylor has got a lot more, I think, to do in this movie. He's definitely prominent in the first film, but he's given like almost like a Busby Berkeley type role in this, where he's designing like a stage show for Prince and Company. And I also like the department store staff a little better. I like Stuart Pankin. Like he's another actor that can play sort of biggish and broadish, and I just, it kind of works for me. So he's kind of like the dick boss in this case of Prince and Company, and I like him better. And I'm just trying to think what else was in my notes here. It's more like Splash, I guess, than Mannequin is, the original one, because she's sort of she's kind of a silly character, in that she's definitely a character out of time. Who there's a lot of jokes about her not understanding the modern day and things like that. And I don't know, it just works for me on so many levels, even to the point where they reuse Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now in this film, which normally I would hate. I would just be like, oh, you're stealing the emotional thunder of the previous movie. But I also get that it's like the franchise song. But for some reason, I find myself much more emotional at the end of this movie with that song, that same song playing. And, Stuart Raffle is the director, and he is definitely a guy who's done some sort of notoriously less than great movies, but something about his sensibilities works with this one. It sort of plays into its own goofiness, and the goofiness of this idea, which is an incredibly silly idea at its core. So all those things come together, and it just kind of works for me. Outside of the fact that the necklace thing is really stupid, the fact that it takes so long for them to figure out the necklace, as you put it on, her turns her back into the mannequin, and if you take it off, she's fine. So like that thing is the only thing that annoys me about the movie. But other than that, I find it light and breezy and fun. So that's my take on Mannequin 2.
It's definitely goofy. It has goofiness to spare, I would say. It is a goofy ass movie. Christy Swanson and William Ragsdale are adorable together, yes. And I watched it this was, I think, only my second time watching it, and I found myself wishing they were just in a straightforward romantic comedy from like 1991. So from this same time period, although was this movie shelved for a couple of years, it has the feeling of a movie that
it could be
maybe sat on the shelf. Like they shot it, because Mannequin was, I think, 87.
Yeah, so this would be 4 years later, and that seems strange to me.
Yeah, it seems like a movie they put together in like 88, and then it sat on the shelf for a couple of years. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I get that feeling too. I feel you. But I also agree that like their chemistry together is really delightful, and I would have liked to have seen a romantic comedy with them, and that may be the core of why I like this movie better.
Yeah.
Is they are just great together, so...
I'm always going to be ride or die for the first Mannequin, I will admit, because Kim Cattrall commits like a motherfucker in that movie.
She really does. I can't argue that.
She will make you believe a mannequin has come to life. And I've always felt like the only thing that the first Mannequin is missing is songs. It's missing musical numbers. Everything about it is pitched as like a 1960s musical, the way that James Spader performs his role, the Estelle Getty character, is it G.W. Bailey? No, what's his
Yes.
name? Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
no,
Everything about it seems like it's right out of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. It's just missing songs, and I always felt like Mannequin was ripe for a musical remake. And Mannequin on the Move does add some musical numbers, as you pointed out. There's a weird production number in a mall. Yes. I don't understand the logic of the movie. And
No.
Hollywood has a dual role in this one because he also plays the nightclub bouncer.
Yes, and it does feel like they gave him some room to improvise there, and I think he's fun in that.
Yeah. But I'm fascinated by your Andrew McCarthy statements because now I want to know who you identify with when you watch St. Elmo's Fire.
I gotta rewatch St. Elmo's Fire, but I may have a problem. I may have an issue there. I don't know.
You're going to be a man without a country because as much as I don't like that movie, I do find myself, of all the characters, identifying with the Andrew McCarthy character. Because he's like the frustrated writer and he's, lovesick and he's like sort of the intellectual, which isn't to say that I'm an intellectual, but it's the closest thing to because otherwise I'm identifying with Rob Lowe and I'm not pretty enough, or Judd Nelson, and I don't think I'm that much of an asshole.
You definitely are not. This is a good question. And this, my Andrew McCarthy waning, whatever it is, may not apply to all his roles. I just noticed, particularly, my wife and I rewatched Pretty in Pink, and that's definitely a script issue and character issue. And
a wig issue.
And definitely a wig yes. But so, between that and Mannequin, I think maybe I'm making a too broad a blanket statement about him, but I do need to revisit some of my other Andrew McCarthy, favorites, if you will, or movies that he stands out in, and see where I'm at, because I have a conundrum now. So.
Well, you have a major advantage over me because you only have one Goofy pick. My entire list is Mannequin 2.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. I like your list.
Everything on my list is like, well, this is a Goofy movie, but where to start? All right, so let's start with The Taking of Beverly Hills.
All right.
Directed by Sidney J. Furie, and starring Ken Wall in his really only, as we were texting about, this was really his one post-Wise Guy fame movie star role, because he had been in a bunch of stuff in the late 70s and throughout the 80s. He's in The Wanderers, and he's in Soldier, which is a movie I know you like.
Yes.
He's in Jinxed, and he's in a bunch of stuff, but he becomes a TV star on Wise Guy, and then really only makes The Taking of Beverly Hills as a movie star. And he plays the excellently named Boomer Hayes, professional quarterback in Los Angeles. And the movie is essentially Die Hard, but instead of Nakatomi Plaza, it's Beverly Hills. That bad guys come in, seal off Beverly Hills in order to rob it. Robert Davi is the main villain, and only Ken Wall and his partner, screw-up cop Matt Frewer, can save Beverly Hills. Matt Frewer narrates the movie for no goddamn reason.
Oh, yeah.
Ken Wall had a leg injury when they shot the movie, and so is limping the entire time, which is actually a touch I really like because it humanizes him, as does his mullet. It tells us bad hair could happen to anyone, really. Here's the thing. You host a podcast sponsored by the New Beverly Cinema. Years ago, I discovered the New Beverly Cinema online because they were showing a 35mm print of The Taking of Beverly Hills.
Nice.
I don't know why I was searching this up, but here I am in Chicago, and I'm like, there's a movie... because at this point, it wasn't on DVD, it wasn't on Blu-ray. You could sometimes catch it on cable, like MGM HD might show it or something like that, but for the most part, you couldn't see The Taking of Beverly Hills. And here was this movie theater in Los Angeles showing it on 35mm, and I was just like, I want to go to there. And so I've followed the New Beverly's calendar ever since, but this was, probably 10 years ago. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think it was still under different ownership then. I don't know exactly what the timeline is, but So this is the movie to which I owe my discovery of the New Beverly Cinema. It is ridiculous. Ken Wall, I think, makes a good action hero, as he's proven in the past. I like him as Boomer Hayes. I really like Harley Jane Kozak as sort of his love interest, although they've spent most of the movie separated again in John McClane, Holly Gennaro fashion. But the whole thing just builds to a frenzy of absurdity. And so you get to the end of the movie and there's like football puns throughout the movie. Everything Ken Wall says is like a football. I'm on defense and they don't know that they're not offense. They don't know I'm in the game, or I don't remember what the hell. It's there's so many football puns. But you get to the end of the movie and he's running around the streets of Beverly Hills chucking ninja stars at bad guys as their cars explode while Epic by Faith No More blares on the soundtrack. And I'm just like, how can I not love this batshit movie?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. Across the board, it is very silly, and yeah, very unlikely duo in Ken Wall and Matt Frewer. Like, I never would have thought somebody was like, aha, I've got it.
They're the Tango and Cash of a new generation.
I mean, it does work, and there is something quirkily charming about the combination of the two guys. But yeah, Matt Frewer in general is just such an interesting actor because he's so overshadowed by the Max Headroom character, which isn't really even. I mean, it's a character, but it's not much of a. He doesn't have a lot of depth, let's put it like that.
Right.
And so, like, when you see him actually being a three-dimensional person, it feels weird to me a little bit. I got to be honest. But yeah, he totally works in this, and I like Die Hard knockoffs. I think it's a fun, subgenre onto itself, and I do like when a character is given some kind of special skill. In this case, he's a quarterback, and then they almost double or triple down on him using his quarterback skills to stop the bad guys. They do that at least twice, if not three times, where he throws something and it ends up being, sort of spot on the money throw, and it saves, or blows up something, or, I just like that kind of silly usage.
Well, and this was the year of the football action movie, because you also have The Last Boy Scout, where Damon Wayans plays a football player turned action star. And then you have Stone Cold with Brian Bosworth, an actual football star turned actor / action hero. All in 91. I have a long-standing theory that 1991 was the peak of the American action film. Because you have like high-profile great shit like Last Boy Scout and Terminator 2, but then if you dig down a little deeper, you have stuff like Stone Cold and The Taking of Beverly Hills, and like these kind of B-grade action movies that are really goofy but also really, really entertaining and fun.
Yeah, I like that theory. I think you can definitely make a case. There's some really good stuff in this year.
Yeah, it's crazy if you were to look at a list of action movies from 91. Like, I think Steven Seagal had 2 action movies this year. It's wild.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, I really like that you picked this one. This is definitely one that I considered. And there's another on your list that I also considered that, they stand out as memorable, enjoyable, entertaining action films. Like, this is really solid. And like you say, it was until the Blu-ray, which I want to say is only a year or two old, maybe a little more than that now. Definitely a VHS only movie that a lot of people had forgotten about. So I love any chance to bring it up. And you mentioned The Wanderers before. There's actually a slight Wanderers reunion in that Tony Gallos plays the EPA guy in this movie. And Tony Gallos is one of his co-stars of The Wanderers. He's like the big guy who's like, leave the kid alone. And he has a very small role in this where he plays a fake EPA guy who actually has a really awkward scene with the mayor, I think, of LA, played by Ferris Bueller's dad.
Yes.
I can't remember that actor's name right now. But he's just like, what are you guys doing? And he's like, we're doing what you would think we'd be doing. It's just this great, ridiculous scene. And but I love seeing Tony Gallos in the movie because I would think that's clearly a Wanderer's nod, like Ken Wall.
Right.
I would think had something to do with that because it's a smaller part. But any nod to the Wanderers I'm into. So.
Oh, you also have Branscombe Richmond with
Yes.
a bigger mullet than Ken Wall, battling for mullet supremacy, and he shows up in another one of my picks a little bit later on.
I definitely noticed that. I'm sure that's not accidental.
This may have been the first movie I imported when I first got a region-free Blu-ray player. There was a German Blu-ray years before the Kino one came out, under the title Boomer. And I definitely imported the German Blu-ray of The Taking of Beverly Hills. Now I have the Kino one and sold off the German import. But
Wow, Boomer, I like that. Very cool alternate title.
yeah. Sidney J. Furie. What a talented director.
He is something. He is definitely
His
something.
resume is bananas.
It's nuts. I mean, yeah, we could spend a good amount of time just on him. You can go even classy with him because
Right.
didn't he do like Ipcress File and stuff like that? And then he
Doesn't he do Lady Sings the Blues?
Lady Sings the Blues and that movie Hit with Billy Williams, which is a crazy sort of blaxploitation, almost action movie. He's all over the place, like a really interesting guy, and I love that he directed this one. So that's very cool.
All right, sir. What is your next pick?
Okay, my next pick from of course 91. I'm gonna give the year.
I'm tempted to do it too, so don't worry about it.
It is Late for Dinner, which is directed by W.D. Richter, who of course did Buckaroo Banzai, among other things. And this one is really neat in that it is also kind of goofy, but weirdly has some incredibly emotional moments that even rewatching, I just watched this, I want to say less than 6 months ago, and I rewatched it a couple days ago, and I'll talk about it in a second, but there's at least one scene in this movie that just, I cannot not cry when I watch the scene. It's just such an emotional scene. I don't know that you are quite as much of a sap as me as to be affected by things like this, but
I am kind of sappy, but I did not cry during Late for Dinner.
okay, good for you. Okay, so the basic plot is it's sort of a fun time travel premise. It's time travel by cryogenic freezing, and you have two lead characters. The main actor is a guy I don't really know.
Yeah, me either.
His name's Brian Wimmer, and I'm sure he's done some other stuff, but I don't know too much. But then Pete Berg plays sort of the mentally challenged friend of his, who is also his wife's brother, and his wife is played by Marcia Gay Harden. And the movie opens in 1962, I want to say, and they, through happenstance and weird circumstance, the Brian Wimmer and Pete Berg characters get themselves in some serious trouble, and the Brian Wimmer character actually gets shot, and they kind of take off to try and get away from the law, and they somehow end up with this kind of wacky doctor who is working on these cryogenic theories, and he somehow, because the Brian Wimmer character is basically unconscious, he only has to deal with the, like I said, somewhat challenged Pete Berg character, and he basically convinces him, like, because the Pete Berg character also has like chronic kidney problems he has to take pills for, and he's like, what if you could wake up and everything would be okay? And of course it's a kind of a mean thing to do to somebody that doesn't really understand what you're asking them. So he more or less gives, I guess, legal approval for them to be frozen, packed in ice, and given some kind of chemical shot that allows them to be frozen for the next 28 years, I think or 29 years. And, you know, as with Idiocracy, which I got to say, I really think Mike Judge has seen this movie. I could be wrong. But there's definitely some Idiocracy in here, you know, in terms of, you know, two guys that arrive in a new time period and the sort of feeling of like technology changing and things like that. And also the way that the pods themselves are kind of, you know, accidentally busted open, you know, in both movies. So I don't know. I'm probably wrong. Mike Judge probably came up with that idea on his own, but anyway, so like they wake up in 1991 and they realize they have time traveled, and they are perplexed by all kinds of quote unquote modern technology like touch button phones, early Motorola cellular flip phones, air conditioning, VHS players, fax machines, ATMs. All these things are very new wave crazy to them. But the emotional stuff comes in that the Brian Wimmer character has a young daughter in 1962, and when he arrives in 1991, she's now, almost 30 something years old. She has her own kid. She's married, and they have just a weird, first meeting. And man, I don't know. I guess I have some kind of fear of somehow failing my daughter and just missing out and generally having her childhood and her, adolescence completely pass me by without having me properly have participated in it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is obviously an extreme example of that. This guy's been gone for 30 years because he was frozen. But they have this what I find to be a really emotional scene where she sees him for the first time and they start talking about sort of what they've missed and how long her mom's, / his wife held on, sort of waiting. And, so there's a lot of goofy stuff in this movie, but those scenes in particular really move me. And I will say that I'm also equally moved by the scenes in Click with Adam Sandler, where he accidentally fast forwards through his kids' lives.
Now you've gone too far.
I have, but that's the sap that I am. So this is a much more grounded, dramatic version of that, and yeah, it just really works on me. Like, I just get all choked up. I think, again, it's my own thing that I worry about as a parent, that you're just like, maybe you're too busy podcasting to be paying attention
right.
to your own child. Like, that's definitely something I think about. So anyway, it's got a really interesting tonal balance of goofiness and emotion, and I kind of like the way it ends. It ends a little bit abruptly in a way, but I kind of like that. I kind of like that it doesn't take forever. It's just, it kind of tees up the ending, and it's just kind of like, yep, that's it, we're out. And that sort of works for me. So now, had you seen this one before, or how did you feel about it?
This has always been on my radar. First, because I remember seeing the trailer for it before Doc Hollywood in 1991 and being like, late for dinner, what's that? Because I don't think I recognized a single person in the cast in 1991. Yeah. And now it's filled with famous faces, not except for Brian Wimmer, but everybody else. And so the other reason it was always on my radar is because in the Leonard Maltin guide, I would always highlight movies that I want to see. And I was always highlighting Late for Dinner because Janeane Garofalo was in the cast list. And I was like, a Janeane Garofalo movie I haven't seen. Well, I need to remedy that. And she basically has one scene working at a fast food counter, but it's a good scene.
Yeah, she's good. But yeah, I wish she was in it more.
Yes, that would always be a good thing. So this was my first time seeing it, and it's really good. It's really, like, quirky, as you pointed out. Like, it has a weird tonal balance. It's like, it's a perfect movie for this kind of list, because it's a movie that, like, maybe a lot of people haven't even heard of, is not on a ton of people's radar, but, like, is a really special, unusual little movie that, as you said, has a huge heart. The performances are good. Pete Berg playing dumb goes a long way with me,
I'm with you. But I find it oddly kind of fun now. I don't know why. Maybe because of the person that he's sort of become.
Right.
He's just, there's an innocence there that he just couldn't play at all now, I don't think. But I get it. That character is a little tricky for sure.
It's the broadest thing in the movie, because it's not an especially broad movie, and he's doing something kind of broad. But
absolutely,
I really like Marcia Gay Harden. I almost wish there was more of her in the movie, and the structure of the movie is such that there almost can't be.
Yeah.
But I was amazed at just how long it sort of takes. It sets up for a really long time, and as you pointed out, you're almost preparing yourself for this, like, fourth act, and then it isn't there. It just cuts to credits, and it's kind of the story is resolved. It's not like it's super open-ended or like they leave a lot of strings untied, but at the same time, most movies would probably tack on another 15 or 20 minutes, and this one doesn't. It just kind of gets in and does its job and moves along, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, whether that's studio interference or who knows what that is. That's in the writing, I don't know. But it's just always interesting when you watch as many movies as we do, and you notice that distinct lack of, last 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
It's just like, oh, I don't really need it, actually. That's fine, So very interesting, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that W.D. Richter directed the movie but didn't write it.
Yeah, no, I found that amusing too.
He's
seems like
generally known as a screen. I mean, I know he directed Buckaroo Banzai, and the only other movie he ever directed was this. Otherwise, he's mostly known for being a screenwriter.
Yeah, so it is a little surprising that. I mean, I would imagine maybe he got involved in the writing on some level, but not credited, and definitely not his original script for sure.
Right.
So yeah, that confused me actually, and I had forgotten that part when I watched it again, and I was like, the writing credit popped up. Even having just seen this months earlier, I had forgotten that, and I was like, "Oh, wow! I could have sworn he wrote this, but I guess not."
All right, well, good pick. And I was delighted because you were so helpful, and you'd let me know like where to find all these movies, and you said this one's on Kino Blu-ray, and so I went to Amazon, and it was $20, and I was like, "All right, well, that's not horrible," but then I went to Kino's website, and it was like $6.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So
wow, that's great.
Score for me.
Very well played. Very well played.
So thank you for that.
Nice.
Yeah. I will go with a comedy drama, sort of, next. I don't know how to characterize this movie. And that is Hanging with the Homeboys, or Hangin' with the Homeboys, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Written and directed by Joseph B. Vasquez, and it is essentially the kind of a One Crazy Night movie. It's not that crazy, but it takes place over the span of one night. It's about four friends: Nestor Serrano, John Leguizamo, Mario Joyner, and Dougie Doug, who get together in New York and go out for the night. And they've all got sort of their own separate things going on. Dougie Doug is kind of a militant anti-racist and is always accusing people of being racist, and he's got a lot of anger. Mario Joyner wants to be an actor, has a girlfriend who he has a relationship troubles that night. John Leguizamo is pondering going to college or not and is feeling very stuck, and Nestor Serrano is kind of just a womanizer, juggling a lot of different girlfriends and in denial of his Puerto Rican heritage. He's trying to pass as Italian. He insists his name is Fernando, but he insists everyone call him Vinny, and tells everyone that he's Italian. And so they go to clubs, they go to bars, they talk to girls, they get in arguments, and it's just one of these movies that I think is billed as a comedy, but has a lot of serious subtext, and is dealing with a lot of stuff. And some of it feels very much stuck in 1991, in particular, Mario Joyner's jacket, which looks maybe like he's wearing a picnic blanket, or I don't know what's going on with that jacket. It's something. And then there's stuff that feels super progressive. There's a scene where John Leguizamo is in love with this girl that he thinks represents purity and innocence, and he's almost like this modern-day incel character, and he's in love with this girl from afar, and then finds out something about her and gets real angry. And Dougie Doug kind of sits down with him and is like, that's on you. You can't project that on this girl. She's not doing anything wrong. The fact that you thought she was this thing and you were wrong isn't her fault. And I was like, man, that is so well observed, even in 2021, much less in 1991. So
yeah,
I really like this movie. I think it's... I know we're both fans of movies that take place all in the span of one night, and this isn't After Hours in terms of like things going crazy and escalating and building to crazy absurdist degrees. This is much more grounded and realistic. But it's just about these friends and their lives. And I think it's really good, and a movie that I don't think there's a Blu-ray of it. So I don't hear it talked about much. I think the cast is really good. At the time, I really only knew Mario Joyner because he was the host of MTV's Half Hour Comedy Hour. He was a stand-up comic. And watching him in this movie, I wish he had a bigger acting career because I think he's really good.
Yeah, I I agree with that. And This is a movie that I had definitely heard of, but I had not seen. So watched it for the first time for this, and yeah, I'm with you across the board. It is a really interesting and, yeah, like you say, progressive while still being very 1991 in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's intriguing. I mean, some of the characters are annoying to the not detriment of the movie, but to the realism of those characters. You know, like they just, you know, the Vinny character is just obnoxious as hell. And
why would anyone be friends with him?
Yeah, I don't know why you'd be hanging out with him. But, I mean, he is funny in that he keeps bringing up, like, this is your fault. I'm having a bad night. Just the narcissism of this guy that's like, you've ruined my night and I'm going to blame you for it, and he keeps coming after Dougie Doug about it. But yeah, Mario Joyner is probably my favorite thing about the movie. Mm-hmm. And I do like Leguizamo, but his character is very emotional, understandably. And it is a weird thing because you're watching at the beginning, you're like, oh, this is going to be a comedy, and you're kind of like, oh no, it's not. Oh, it's a little more serious than that. Oh no, it's definitely more serious than that. It has some lighter moments, but it actually has a lot more dramatic moments. And that, that's just a matter of sort of adjusting your feeling about what you were watching.
Right.
And that, I think that was what I was dealing with. It was like, oh, this is going to be one crazy night. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not that. Oh, okay. No, this is something else. And it's got a poignancy to it that I enjoyed. And another movie that has kind of an abrupt ending in a way, like it gets to the end and it kind of wraps up everybody real quick, and then it's out, and I'm like, oh, I kind of like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not dragging out all the arcs of all these guys. You really kind of see the main thing that they need, that sort of shows who they, if they've learned something, what direction they're headed, or if they haven't. You get to see that too, Which
I like, because I think a worse movie would have them all learn something and come out of this night the other side, like being wiser. And no, the movie is realistic enough to say, like, no, some people aren't going to change, and this is who they are. And the Leguizamo character made me nervous at times because he does seem so filled with anguish that could easily turn to rage.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's, confronted again in the movie when he starts a fight because of this girl. But there's, I don't know, there's something really almost too dark about the way that he plays the character that in a different movie I could see it becoming much more violent.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I'll say that the Dougie Doug character is also interestingly tricky in some scenes, but has some of the most poignant moments in the movie. Like, mm-hmm. You mentioned that scene with Leguizamo, and his ending is actually really interesting,
mm-hmm.
because it's kind of saying, well, like it's sort of an introspective thing, and it's not really hammering it too hard, but it kind of is saying, this is where you're headed, sort of thing. And yeah, I like that it doesn't go any further than that. It just kind of leaves that be. And although I did want a little more, I actually was kind of fine with where it left him, and
mm-hmm.
It was interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of things about it. It doesn't feel like, it definitely feels like an indie as opposed to a studio movie in terms of character and structure and arcs and endings. So I always appreciate that, because it just doesn't feel cookie cutter in that way, So it definitely has some resonance,
I miss 90s New Line, because they would make these kind of low budget movies for audiences that maybe weren't always being served, and they would make different kinds of movies. If you showed me a list of like the movies that New Line made in the late 80s and 90s, I'll bet you I like 75% of them.
Yeah, no, they were doing some really interesting stuff. I mean, everybody thinks, the house that Freddie built,
right?
But New Line has always been doing interesting stuff, and the 90s was a really neat time for sure. And I think there's a lot of other movies like this one that have kind of been neglected. I think the 90s is a tough spot for being in between, right? Not quite the end of VHS. It's obviously got a ways to go before VHS peters out. But in terms of the transition from VHS to DVD and then Blu-ray, like you noticed, this movie doesn't have a Blu-ray release, and maybe it must have a DVD release. Yeah, it does.
It does. Okay, I was going to say I would think so, but I wasn't sure. I just streamed it.
Yeah, no, I did too. But yeah, no, it does have a DVD release. But that said, I feel like something about the '90s and that time, and I don't know. There's just something about that being a black hole in terms of some physical media transition. You know, there's just a lot of '90s, middle, and late '90s, early middle and late '90s that somehow didn't make it, and I've always been kind of puzzled by that. I don't really understand why the newest movies, in terms of like if you say that the beginning of DVD is circa '98 or maybe a little earlier, it feels like the newest movies should get that treatment, and some of them didn't for a really long time. So it's always perplexed me why that happened.
Yeah.
But this is a good one to bring up. I'm glad you brought it up, and I wouldn't have seen it if not for your recommendation on this list.
All right, cool. What is next for you?
Okay, the next one I guess is technically a TV movie, and then it was made for HBO, directed by Martin Campbell, interestingly, and it's called Cast a Deadly Spell, and it is a sort of fantastical 1940s noir hard-boiled detective thing, but involves magic a lot, and the 1940s of the film, magic is just a regular sort of part of the world. But this cast is really pretty impressive. Fred Ward plays the Philip Marlowe type detective. The movie stars David Warner, Julianne Moore, Clancy Brown. There's a bunch more that I'm missing here, but definitely some more familiar faces. But he's basically hired by David Warner to find a book, a Necronomicon, that Clancy Brown is sort of the big heavy in the movie, and he's trying to get a hold of as well. And so it's just kind of fun to see it all play out. The broad cell would be like Chinatown with magic, I guess, if you want, because there is sort of some conspiratorial stuff that comes up, and but also the other thing that's funny is the Fred Ward character is H. Philip Lovecraft, so like that's a very knowing nod to the author and the universe that's sort of exists here. There are apparently a lot of private eyes use magic, and a lot of people in general do, but he's that sort of an anachronistic detective who doesn't believe in it, doesn't want to use it. Like I said, it's on HBO Max in HD, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And to be honest, like it was one of those where I was watching it and I was like, have I seen this? Have I not? I don't know. I'm getting so old I can't tell anymore. And so it was one of those things where I thought I had seen it, but it might be a discovery. Either way, it was very enjoyable. But this world has like all kinds of weird things in it, kind of like a Harry Potter or a Fantastic Beasts kind of thing, where you have like the rain is sometimes red. At first I thought it was bloody rain, but actually it's just red rain, I guess. Cars have actual gremlins inside them, and so lots of weird little magical strangeness is sort of commonplace, and I guess I always kind of like those little details when a movie can just kind of throw them in and cruise right past them and make it just part of the fabric of the film. And I feel like that the movie does that pretty well. So it's a detective movie, and it's kind of a horror little bit, but more magic movie. And I just like noir films combined with other genres, like Blade Runner or whatever. I've always found it an interesting and malleable genre that can take on other genres and still work. And I think this works. So definitely recommended.
Yeah, no, it's super good. I completely forgot until I was watching it today, actually, that Martin Campbell directed it. I remember when it was on HBO in '91, watching it and really liking it, and Fred Ward is so perfectly cast. And though I didn't know who she was at the time, holy shit, Julianne Moore.
Yeah.
And I love like a horror noir, and there's so few of them. I mean, I can think of like Lord of Illusions and Angel Heart.
Yeah. Can't think of too many others.
Right? And Cast a Deadly Spell. Like, those are the ones. I'm sure there are others. I just can't think of what they are right now.
Yeah. No, it's it's a genre mashup that I wish had more entries because they are all interesting. Even Lord of Illusions, which I'm not like huge fan of, I think is an interesting movie, and they always tend to be that, you know. So I just wish more people would do them. I know it's not probably a blockbuster formula, you know.
Right. True.
It's more of a cinephile kind of fandom kind of thing, but regardless, I always think they end up being pretty cool. So let's get more of these, folks. Come on.
Yeah, you would think with like the number of indie horror movies that come out now that are like just about wearing their influences, you would think we would get more of them.
Yeah. I don't get it. I don't understand. But
I don't know.
Maybe there's a new wave of them coming. I hope so, because I'll line up and watch whatever they put out. You know.
Yeah. But this is a good one. I wish there was a Blu-ray of it, and I know it's like owned by HBO and there's weird licensing stuff with them. But Tales from the Hood came out, and that was an HBO production.
Yeah. Same thing with No Escape. Umbrella put that out, so maybe somebody outside the U.S. like Umbrella or somebody could work their magic.
Ooh, nicely done.
Pun intended. On getting us a Blu-ray of Cast a Deadly Spell. I hope so, but at least, you know, if it is streamable, people can go to HBO Max and check it out, and I do recommend that.
Yeah, definitely. That I just always worry because it's like one of these days they may take it down.
Yeah, no, that's the part of like watch it actually soon.
Yeah, watch it this week. All right, next for me. Oh boy, what do I go with? All right, I'll go with If Looks Could Kill.
All right.
Which will always remind me of the Dennis Miller joke from Weekend Update. If looks could kill, get Grieco a mirror, babe. That was his big joke in 91. So I remember going on vacation to Florida with my friend in 1991, and we spent half the week at the movies, and one of the movies we saw was If Looks Could Kill, and I was like, that movie is way smarter than I thought it was going to be. That's a smart movie masquerading as a stupid movie. And that's probably because Fred Dekker had his hands in it. Which I forgot, but he did the story for it. And then it's written by Darren Star, who, of course, is famous for like creating Sex and the City and lots of big TV shows that people really love. But he wrote the screenplay for this. And it's essentially James Bond in high school. Richard Grieco plays Michael Corbin, a high school student in danger of not graduating. He has to go to Paris so he can pass his French class, where he is mistaken for a secret agent and brought in to bring down Roger Rees as Augustus Steranko. Gabrielle Anwar plays his love interest. Her father was murdered by Augustus Steranko. Her father played by...
Oh, shoot. Who plays her dad? I forgot.
Cameo of the 90s.
Oh, that's it. That's her dad. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. That is Roger Daltrey.
Roger fucking Daltrey.
Wow. And it's so fast. It's literally like a minute, if that.
It makes no sense that he's in this movie. But he sure is. He shows up, like breaks through a window, does a line, and then is strangled to death by Linda Hunt, playing the henchwoman. Ilsa Grunt is her name. She has a necklace. Second movie with a special necklace after Mannequin 2 that turns into like that's our recurring theme. A necklace that turns into like a whip, and she uses it to strangle people. The movie is ridiculous and failed to turn Richard Grieco into a movie star. This was kind of right when he was starting to pop on 21 Jump Street. And this was sort of his attempt, and I'm fascinated by like the one-shot attempt of turning a TV star into movie stars. I think that would make like someday I'll have to sit down and just make a list of all the movies that did it, because I'm always fascinated by them. But I think he's fine in the movie. He's smug and kind of irritating, but that's the character he's playing. I just think it's really fun and has a good sense of humor about itself. It's really goofy. It's both spoofing the James Bond movies while also sort of lovingly playing into all of the cliches of the James Bond movies and, you know, adjusting them for the high school set. There's a fun running joke about his French teacher being mistaken for like a super spy, and she gradually becomes more and more involved in this plot. I think it's a really fun movie.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I had not seen it probably, boy, it'd been a while. Definitely since VHS, despite the fact that when we were texting out our list, I had the Warner Archive DVD still in plastic. And I had bought it because I remembered liking it. But I don't think I hadn't watched the DVD, so I probably hadn't seen it in, since the mid 90s.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very silly, but it's one of those like sort of high-pitched screwball silly movies where like crazy violent things are happening and it's just sort of played for laughs. And, I kind of like that sort of sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and, I like the cast, and yeah, it's fun. It's definitely, like you say, very much sending up and playing into at the same time, and I kind of dig that. And yeah, no, it's especially by the end, it just gets so heightened and so much like an actual Bond movie,
right?
That I'm like even more in by the end, and that's great. So
yeah,
it's fun. It's definitely a fun ride.
It is. It's good. Like I said, all the movies on my list are Mannequin 2. So this is a definite Mannequin 2 choice.
I would love to see a double of this and Mannequin 2. I think that would be interesting. They have nothing to do with each other, but for some reason, if we were doing a 1991 double, I think they'd be fun for some reason. Together.
I'm into it.
Yeah. Let's see here. Next up for me. Okay, now we're getting serious here.
Oh boy.
This stuff. The next two are actually two that I think are just like great movies, really, really great. And so my number 2 spot is City of Hope. This is a John Sayles film. I'm a huge fan of Sayles, as I'm sure you are. But I think, he, in the 90s, I feel like there was a lot more people that were sort of following his career and his path. And even then, when he did for instance, when he did Lone Star, I was getting into him because of the Corman connections, and then I started to see his older films, and I saw Baby It's You, which I still think is maybe my favorite, although, God, it's tough. He's got so many great movies. But so I started catching up, and then Lone Star came out. I saw it in the theater, and I waited on City of Hope for a long time, and I can't remember when I first saw it, but it wasn't that long ago, I don't think. Or if I saw it on VHS, it just zipped right by me. Like it wasn't what I don't know what I was expecting. If I was expecting the quirkiness of Brother from Another Planet or something else. But it didn't register quite right for me then. And watching it now, I think it's one of the best films he ever did. And it is sort of this sprawling, epic portrait of a New Jersey city. I think it's like Hudson City, and I looked up, because the cops are wearing like Hudson City badges or something. I looked up Hudson City, and I think it said that was a city that was actually a township or city in New Jersey in, I want to say, the like late 1800s, early 1900s, and was somehow absorbed by other cities in the area, so it didn't really exist now. And I thought that was an interesting choice, that they didn't make it a real city that exists now. It's its own thing, but it is obviously standing in for New York or some other smaller New Jersey cities, I guess. So it's dealing with the citizens on up through the police, through the mayor's office, and the criminal enterprises that are entangled with the city government. And it is very much, and I'm certainly not the first person to notice this, but it definitely feels like something that The Wire is drawing from.
Yeah.
That David Simon saw this movie and was like, hey, what would it be like to just focus on the drug dealers and then we could sort of work our way up? It just feels like not a blueprint, but definitely something that could have influenced him. But so the cast is incredible. It's Vincent Spano, Tony LoBianco. They play father and son in what I find to be an actually pretty interestingly accurate looking father and son duo. Like they kind of look alike and they play off each other well. Tony LoBianco is a mobster who does construction, and Vincent Spano's his son, who's kind of burnt out on the son of a mobster life, working a no work job. He's done with it and he sort of wants something else. Then you have Joe Morton as like a city councilman. You have Chris Cooper and Todd Graff, who I'm actually a big Todd Graff fan. Like he shows up in The Abyss and some other movies. Like he is just one of those great, reliable character actors that always is interesting and plays this kind of character. He plays sort of a street dude in this movie. David Strathairn, obviously a total sales regular. Frankie Faison, Angela Bassett, Josh Mostel, Lawrence Tierney. I mean, it's just so deep a bench in terms of the cast. And John Sayles himself is in it. And I'm usually not always in favor of directors acting in their own movies, but Sayles is actually, he's really good in this. Like he's just a total scumbag, kind of a criminal who runs a semi-legitimate, but not really, auto repair shop. And he sort of becomes involved in some ways in the bigger, machinations of the plot of this movie. And he definitely does not detract in his scenes. And he actually has some really great lines in the movie. So that's really an interesting thing. Oh, Gina Gershon is in this too, as Vincent Spano's sister. And I like that. So it's just this incredible cast, and the scope of the story and all the characters is really ambitious. And it is shot by Robert Richardson the same year he is nominated and I believe wins for JFK. And he's doing what he used to do a lot more, which is that sort of halo effect, that really hot, overhead lighting, and it works really well in this movie. But I love that he, was the JFK guy. I mean, was the Oliver Stone guy, and now Quentin is using him all the time, and I think they've done some really great work together, and I love that. But this is one I think, if you know his work, you'll definitely appreciate the cinematography at least. But it's, again, a movie that I feel like is just overlooked, and underappreciated in Sayles' filmography, which, again, is really strong, like so many great films from him. So it was really neat. This is on Amazon Prime, and in revisiting it, I was just like, one of those movies I was kind of waiting for it to disappoint me, and it really didn't. So I don't know how you feel about it. What are your thoughts?
This was my first viewing. I think 4 of your 5 were first viewings for me. Except for Mannequin 2. I think I had not seen any of them.
Nice.
That's the one I had seen. I've wasted my life. So,
no way.
Honestly, when you told me this one, I was like, the Patrick Swayze hospital movie? Like, that's what I had in my head. But that's City of Joy, not City of Hope. So when I sat down to watch this, I was like, oh, no, this is different. This is a John Sayles movie that I had never seen. So that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. Like, so many things that you already pointed out, just the writing, the direction, the long takes, the way that he shifts the camera from, he'll follow one character and then just in the span of a single shot move on to another character, and we're into a different story, but there's no cuts or anything. It's so cool. The cinematography by Robert Richardson, the cast, every single person that shows up is like, holy shit, I can't believe. And again, so many of them were not yet big stars, Angela Bassett before she was really anybody, and Gina Gershon before she was really anybody, and David Strathairn before. And they're all doing amazing work. The Wire comparison is spot on, because that was what was in my head the entire time, just the way that it follows all these different elements of the city, various forms of corruption, of crime, of sort of moral decay. It's all there, and it's so interesting, and it's so well acted. The only distracting thing for me, and I can't find the actor's name, I've been on IMDb trying to find it, the teacher who gets attacked by the 2 kids.
Yeah, what has he been in, man?
He's the elephant guy from How I Got Into College. So that was the distraction. God. That was the distraction for me. There's nothing wrong with his performance. He's good in the movie, but the whole time I was like, L.E. Funt from How I Got Into College.
Good catch, man. That's so interesting, because I I've watched that again recently, and for whatever reason, I was watching him like it didn't stick with me too long, but I'm like, he's in some kind of weird, goofy comedy thing,
Yeah.
and it didn't distract me too much. But now that you mention it, I was like, why do I know that guy? And that's what it's from. That's great. I love it. Savage Steve connections.
Yeah, but great movie and great pick.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I really am. Yeah, it's definitely one that I don't know if it's the length that scared me off or why I hadn't come back to it. But yeah, I just, like I said, I don't know if I'm wrong here, but if you tell me, I just feel like there's a lot of people who like John Sayles movies and still haven't seen this one. So definitely press play on this if you can.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool.
It was great to hear you guys bring up Lone Star on a recent Pure Cinema too, because that movie rules.
Yeah, and I was going to say, one thing that occurred to me is that he's kind of doing a dry run for some of Lone Star in that. Like, he adds some really great stuff, the murder mystery stuff and the sheriff stuff. But there is that same sort of, citizens, police, city government, corruption. All those things are part of Lone Star as well. But it's obviously a completely different location, and that changes the movie drastically. But I do think it's interesting the two films have him working out some of this stuff in different ways, That's pretty neat.
Yeah. All right, well, so from one heavy drama to another, my next pick is Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Nice.
A very heavy drama starring Mickey Rourke and Don Johnson as the titular characters who, as the opening credits will tell you, have no affiliation with the actual brands of Marlboro or Harley Davidson. Apparently, they did not bother to clear those names before they went ahead and called their fucking movie Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. So this is, I love a buddy movie. It's sort of a semi-futuristic. I think it's kind of the future, but I think it's like the future for 1991. So it's like 1997 or something like that, right? It's
but it's definitely trying to do some weird, like low-level future things. Like they turn Burbank into an international airport, and a Concorde goes flying over. You're like, wow, that's crazy. All right, yeah, no, it's really interesting, that sort of low-level future where it's like kind of subtle in some ways and kind of not in others, and it's still trying to be kind of throwback Western, definitely feels like Butch and Sundance or Sam Peckinpah, it's Don Michael Paul, the actor. I always think of him as the actor, but he's much more of a writer now, and this is his first script, I think. I'm not sure. I think it's but it definitely, to me, it feels like a kind of movie that would appeal to maybe Big Trouble in Little China fans, although it's not quite as funny as that, or like They Live fans because of the wrestling crossover. You have Big John Studd in a very prominent role. And Jesus Christ, Big John Studd is really big. Like, I looked it up, 6'10". He looks like a giant in this movie. It's pretty crazy.
Otherwise, he would just be John Studd.
You're right.
His name, of course, is Jack Daniels, because everybody in this movie is named after Chelsea Field, who I love Chelsea Field, let me just say. So I'm happy to see her show up in anything, but her name is Virginia Slim.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
This movie is stupid. It is gloriously stupid. It is it's another one where like it's a lot of recognizable faces before they really would hit. So you get like Tia Carrere right before Wayne's World, and you get Tom Sizemore before, cocaine, I guess. And you get Daniel Baldwin and Giancarlo Esposito and Vanessa Williams. You get lots of recognizable faces in kind of small roles. But essentially, Harley and Marlboro plan a heist. They're going to rip off Tom Sizemore's character, and they accidentally steal a bunch of drugs. It's some new designer drug, and so then they end up in his crosshairs, and Daniel Baldwin plays like his henchman. Daniel Baldwin and two other henchmen wear these long black leather trench coats that are like bulletproof.
Dusters or something?
Yeah. Mickey Rourke has openly talked about how he hated making this movie.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think he comes across as miserable. I don't think he's phoning it in, but I do think that Don Johnson is turning up the charm in order to compensate. And Don Johnson is already a pretty charming motherfucker, and so when he decides to turn it up even more, you get a really, really great Don Johnson performance as sort of this laconic cowboy. I like their friendship. I like the action. I like how goofy all of it is. It's directed by Simon Windsor, who I think is a really underrated Australian director. He's made a couple movies I really like, including Quigley Down Under, which is a really terrific Western, and The Phantom, which is a great Billy Zane kind of comic book movie before comic book movies were everything, you know.
Nice. Yeah, I forgot that he did. I remembered Quigley Down Under, but I forgot that he did The Phantom. That's great.
Yeah. And I'm not name dropping here, but I once had occasion to talk to Joe Dante about The Phantom because he was originally going to make that movie. And he said that they screwed it up because it was written to sort of be a comedy. It was written to be a parody. And that's how he was going to make it. And then they took the same script and just played it straight. But I would argue that the playing it straight is what makes that movie work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it is interesting. I'd be curious to see. The comedic version doesn't sound. I mean, of course, if Joe did it, I think I'd be in. But
yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else doing that, I don't know. I think what they have is pretty compelling for me. So that's intriguing. I didn't realize Joe Dante was supposed to do that. That's neat.
He ended up, I think he has a producer credit on it. But
wow. I totally missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, I remember, I think I just did the math, and I was giving away my age. I was 17 in 1991. And so I'm pretty sure that one of my good friends and I, because we could, went to see this as an R-rated movie that we could go to the theater and see without our parents because we were 17. And it was one of those movies that really, I think in part because of the time, because I was, driving, I was working, I was still in high school, but like I was into movies, but I was getting more into the idea of like, well, I can go to see an R-rated movie by myself. Yeah. And so this one was very special in that way. Cause I remember like I said, 91 is the year that I turned 17. And so it was an early R-rated theatrical movie for me, and so it's already a movie that is my kind of movie, but the fact that I saw it at that time, very formative, it stuck with me for a long time after that, and I think eventually I lost track of it, but it was one of those movies that I remember really fondly having seen in the theater and being excited that I had seen it, because it was really not like, especially the 17-year-old me, not like a lot of the movies I had seen.
Right.
I mean, Big Trouble in Little China was another one that I'd seen, many years, five years earlier, that it also had that kind of impression. And I think it wasn't as strong an impression as that, but it was definitely one of those movies that stands out to me and that I remember fondly because of that. And as soon as the Blu-ray was announced from Shout, I was like, well, I got to get that. And, it's so, but it's definitely a movie that's been lost. I think a lot of people haven't seen it or haven't watched it in a long time.
Well, and I think that they maybe dismiss it because of the title, which is an obvious reference, as you mentioned, to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I really like it. I think it's really entertaining. I really like Mickey Rourke and Don Johnson as actors, so it's fun to see them play in this action movie. I like the sort of quasi-futuristic world building. And I, like you, saw this in the theater in 1991.
Nice.
Rooked my parents had split up maybe like a year before. And so that's what me and my dad did to spend time together, was go see movies. So if there was something I wanted to see, I could usually convince him because of his divorce guilt into taking me to see it. So nice. I remember driving probably 40 minutes to a second run theater because not everywhere was playing Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Definitely not.
You had to go looking for it if you wanted to see it, and seeing it, and I've loved it ever since.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those. Like, that's neat that you saw it in the theater too, because I distinctly remember that, and I was just kind of like, wow, was I just turning 17? That totally makes sense. That's the kind of movie I would have gone to see, but also I would have gone to see anything that looked interesting and was R-rated again because I could.
Right.
So yeah, that's neat. That's really neat that we both saw it in the theater. Yeah, it's a really nostalgic film for me. Just rewatching it last night, I was like, oh wow, this just takes me back, you know?
Yeah.
So more people need to see this movie. Is it on streaming somewhere outside of the Blu-ray?
I'll have to look. I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Let me check.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But while you're doing that, I'll move into my number one, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So this is another one that's...
It's on HBO Max.
Well, there we go. Oh, nice. Wow.
HBO Max to the rescue.
Yeah, and then my number one pick is also on HBO Max. It was. I think it might have been part of the TCM Film Festival programming, which, by the way, I thought was really neat.
Yeah.
That they put that on HBO Max, including little interviews and little special features, if you will, that you could sort of experience had you seen these movies in the theater as part of the TCM Fest. So I don't know. Point being is I don't know how long it'll stay on HBO Max, but it is a Warner Brothers movie, so I'm hoping they'll let it stick there for a while. And it is in HD, which you couldn't, like, I owned it digitally, but only in SD. It doesn't have a Blu-ray, and I really want it to, and that is Nancy Savoca's film Dogfight. And yeah, this is a really special movie to me, and I kind of forget how much I like it until I rewatch it fully every time. Because sometimes, you know, you'll put on a movie and you'll watch the beginning of it and you'll go, oh, yeah, I like this, but why did I think I loved this? And then you watch the whole thing and you're like, okay, yes, now I remember. And what this movie does that I think is so interesting is it sets up its main character as a real piece of shit from the very beginning. Basically, the idea is it's 1963, San Francisco, another sort of one-night movie that becomes more than that. It sort of becomes a flashback onto a one-night movie. And it has, the great River Phoenix in one of my favorite performances that he ever had, along with Lily Taylor in one of my favorite performances of hers as well. And so it's the fall of 63. River Phoenix plays Eddie Birdlace. He's an 18-year-old Marine Corps volunteer who's about to ship out to Vietnam with three of his buddies, and they have planned this massive blowout, and they play this really horrible game or this event that's called a dogfight, where the object is to bring the ugliest girl you can, and then sort of in secret, although obviously some of the women that are involved find out, and it's pretty crushing to them, but sort of in secret they try to show off their bad dates at a bar to the judges, and the winner gets the pot. Everybody puts in $50 or something, and it's a pretty good sized pot for 1963. But so what happens is he is looking for his ugly date, and he strikes out with a few people, and then he encounters Lily Taylor in a coffee shop singing with her guitar. She works at this coffee shop. Her mom owns the shop, and she's sort of a folk singer fan / wannabe singer herself. And he is immediately drawn to her because they've really done their best to frump her up. They even sort of gave her a giant sweater, it feels like, and they've done a lot to make her look heavier than she clearly is, and her hair, they've made it look pretty terrible. And so he starts to sort of entice her to come to this thing, and then he sort of starts to have second thoughts, and then he's going to walk away, and then she, for whatever reason, talks her, I think her mom or aunt, I can't remember which, into letting her go, and so she goes, and you can tell that the whole time he's starting to feel worse and worse about it, and then eventually she does find out through E.G. Daily, of all people, who is also part of this, which is great. And she is understandably mortified and hurt and super angry at him, and is just basically like, fuck you, how could you do this, how could you treat people like this? And he then is put in the position of having to try and redeem himself. And the movie really has its work cut out for it in terms of allowing for that. And there's a lot of moments where you start to think, oh, is he going to fuck this up? Is he going to do something shitty? And it ends up being a really tender film. And he really does, I think, ultimately, in my eyes, recover the best he can from what he's done. And they have a really pretty sweet night overall. And it sort of resonates forward in time. And I won't go any further than that. But I'm very curious how you felt about it. I know that opening is a little bit rough, and so that's kind of a hard thing to get by. But if you can, I feel like the movie really pays off.
Yeah, I've wanted to see this movie for years because Adam Risky is a huge fan of it and once wrote a piece about how it was his favorite movie of '91.
Nice.
And it was just hard to see because there was a DVD, but it was out of print. And so when you picked it as one of your 5 and then it was on HBO Max, it was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I can finally see Dogfight and kind of check it off the list. It's another one of these movies that like wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I think I was expecting it to be more of a, not one crazy night, but a one night thing, almost like a Before Sunrise. And it goes in some directions that I wasn't expecting, and I won't say what they are. But it really caught me off guard, the places that the movie goes and where it sort of lands. But, I mean, it's all really, really, really great. It's a little bit science fiction in that this Ugly Women contest contains Lily Taylor and E.G. Daily, only in Hollywood.
It's very silly.
Only in the movies. Is that who we're casting as our ugly characters?
Well, and the way that they try and sell E.G. Daily as unattractive is that she's missing her 2 front teeth, and that is one of the big selling points for her being apparently unattractive.
Right.
But obviously she's not. It's very silly in that sense. But like if you can go along with that part of it,
oh, of course,
then I think it works. But I'm totally with you. That is definitely a concession that needs to be made.
And the performances, it's essentially a 2-character movie with River Phoenix and Lily Taylor, and they're both so good. And the developing of their relationship and them sort of getting to know each other and care about each other in the span of a single night is like so beautiful and just really, really lovely. It's a really great little film.
Well, I'm really glad you liked it, and hats off to Adam Risky for also being a fan of it. Yeah, it's another one I'd love to see a Blu-ray of, but yeah, that last moment, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's a moment where there isn't dialogue, and there could be, and the fact that there isn't makes it all the more powerful.
Yeah. And
it really sits with me when I watch that ending, and I'm just like, the characters made a choice. And the movie is about, it's about compassion. It's about forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about, love. And yeah, it's just, Lily Taylor is very true to her character. And yeah, it's just beautiful. I really think it's really great. And there's a really neat little interview that Alicia Malone does with Nancy Savoca that was available on the TCM as part of the TCM Film Fest stuff. I don't know if that's all still up on HBO Max or not, but if it is, definitely check it out. It was really neat to hear Nancy Savoca talking about the movie and her memories of it. I enjoyed that a lot.
I haven't seen any of her other movies. Should I be seeking them out? I mean, I remember True Love. I remember Household Saints, but I've never seen them.
This is my favorite. I think True Love is definitely worth seeking out, but that one's weirdly even harder to. I mean, it's also. I want to say that one's not streaming either. It's DVD only.
Oh, boy. And
yeah, so it's a tough one. And I think the same with Household Saints. I like those films, but Dogfight is the big winner for me.
Okay.
True Love, I can see like that's the breakout. That's her, that was, I want to say that was around the same time as Reservoir Dogs. And that sort of indie boom that was happening in the early 90s. And you can see why that led to new stuff. Annabella Sciorra is really good in that movie. But this is the one that will always be my favorite of her films. And like I said, Blu-ray, please, ASAP.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you liked it.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
so
thank
glad
you for picking it, because like it finally nudged me to see it, and I'm really glad I did, because it's really, really good.
Well, I have to thank you for what I think is going to be your next pick, because I had the similar experience.
Yeah, well, it's not quite Dogfight, but
No, but it's enjoyable on the level of the kind of movie it is in a similar way.
sure. It is John Landis's Oscar, starring Sylvester Stallone, and once again a murderer's row of character actors.
Insane.
Yeah, an unbelievable cast in this thing. And I remember, again, going to see it as a kid because they opened a second-run theater down the street from my house, and if it was, PG-13 or PG, I could go. I could walk there, and I had my $1.50 that I could go see the movie. And so I went just because it was PG and I could see it, and I was like, all right, you Sylvester Stallone comedy, let's see, because I didn't have high expectations even as a kid for a Sylvester Stallone comedy. My reference point was like Rhinestone, basically. I don't think he had done Stop or My Mom Will Shoot yet. And I don't even hate Rhinestone, for the record, but
no, I don't either. I don't either.
But I didn't have high expectations because I don't think the name John Landis really meant anything to me as a kid. So I really was just there as a Sylvester Stallone fan. And what I got was this really funny throwback screwball comedy that feels like an old Preston Sturges movie. Sylvester Stallone plays Snaps Provolone, who is this sort of would-be reformed gangster who's trying to go straight. And it's essentially one day in his life as there are crazy mix-ups with his daughters. Vincent Spano shows up again from City of Hope.
Yes.
Speaking of people wanting to be with his daughters. Kurtwood Smith plays like an FBI agent who's watching him, hoping that he'll mess up. His goons are played by Chaz Palminteri and Peter Riegert.
I love Riegert, by the way. Riegert's an all-time fan.
So funny in this movie, too. Tim Curry has a really great role as an elocution expert who comes in to teach his daughter, who's played by Marissa Tomei. It's just a really funny kind of a throwback comedy that I think, Landis is a guy who could make this kind of a movie work. And Stallone is good in the movie. I think he's funny, and it works. His sort of iconography as being bigger than everything else in the movie works to the movie's advantage because he brings all this baggage to Snaps Provolone so that we buy him as this larger than life figure even before the movie starts.
Yeah. No. This was a real surprise. I think I told you I'd started it at one point. I can't remember. It was for another podcast I was working on. I'm like, oh, maybe this one. And it didn't catch for whatever silly reason. But this movie reminds me, it's not quite as fast paced, although it does have a really good clip. It reminds me of something like Noises Off, which is also based on a stage play. Mm-hmm. That one, of course, directed by Bogdanovich. Very much him trying to do Howard Hawks, super fast screwball kind of thing. But it has a similar vibe in some ways, in that it's just one thing after another, like one mix up after another, and just a lot of funny people moving in and out of scenes, and then it's got even like little throwbacks. You're talking about Preston Sturges. It's got Eddie Bracken in the movie,
right?
So you've got him as part of a couple Preston Sturges movies, I think, Hail the Conquering Hero and Miracle at Morgan's Creek, and maybe others. And Don Amici, who is sort of a regular in Landis films. I can't remember if he did a Sturges movie. I feel like he did, and I'm not remembering now which one. But he's a throwback to that. Then you got, I think you already mentioned Kirk Douglas, and but Richard Romanus and oh man, there's a couple other, Harry Shearer, William Atherton, Mark Metcalf. All these people showing up in the movie. It just really is nonstop, like you said, murderer's row of an incredible cast, and they're all very funny. And Chaz Palminteri, I've actually feel like I've seen him play this character or something like it in other movies, but I haven't liked it as much as I liked his take on it in this movie.
Yeah.
Just sort of the dumb thug, you know. He can play that, but I really like him playing it in this. It just works. I just was really, you know, and when Tim Curry shows up in your movie like more than halfway through, like you definitely have, you got some energy to burn. That's a great boost. 'Cause he's a lot of fun, and he's even sort of subdued. Like his character's kind of straight-laced in a way, but Tim Curry plays the hell out of it. He's great, you know. And yeah, Vincent Spano is like, I saw somebody reviewing, maybe it was Alphabet City on Letterboxd, and they were like, you know, everybody's good in this except Vincent Spano. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I think I'm now starting to get it. Like he has maybe a slightly theatrical way that he approaches dialogue and delivery. And I guess I can see how that might bother some people. It actually doesn't bother me in any movie, but I think it plays really well in this movie, which is, you know, very sort of theatrical in its own way. So I just was really, what a pleasant surprise, you know, for me to get through this thing and just be like, oh man, and it nails the ending, and, you know, and the ending is also kind of a throwback straight to Preston Sturges. And there's at least one movie, I'm not going to spoil, that ends exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So he clearly, like you say, is drawing from Sturges and that old school comedy feeling. And so I really appreciate that. And the fact that it almost, since it's based on a play, it makes sense, but it almost entirely takes place inside of one house. Granted, it's a big house. That's hard to pull off too. I think, you know, it doesn't get stale. It's got drive and energy to it that allows for it to remain interesting, even at over 90 minutes for a comedy, which it's actually just like 11 minutes shy of 2 hours. I want to say, and it's still just trucks right along. So very impressed with this one. This was like my big discovery from this. And so I appreciate, again, that you recommended it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm really glad. I kind of picked it because I realized I was picking too many action movies, and I wanted to pick a comedy. And this is, I think, for me, sort of the underrated gem in Landis's filmography, because I haven't fully embraced the stupids yet.
Yeah, me neither. So, like, I'm probably with you. This is definitely, obviously a lot of people know about Into the Night now, but that used to be my big underrated Landis film. And I still feel like it's a bit underrated.
It is, yeah.
This is more so, and very funny. So I had a blast.
Oh, that's so great. That's it. Those are our 10 movies. I think those are 10 solid choices for anybody looking for some 30-year-old movies that maybe they haven't seen.
Yeah, no, that's a fun group. I really like the overall breadth of everything we talked about, and I think I get behind all these recommendations. These are all fun, or all interesting, or all good in their own ways.
Yeah.
You know?
Most are available either on Blu-ray or streaming, you know, the ones that we pointed out. Oscar has a Kino Blu-ray. The ones that we pointed out that are streaming, you should definitely check out sooner rather than later, and then pick up the Blu-rays for the rest. Next time there's a Kino sale or something, you can pick up a handful of these titles.
Good call.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Brian, for doing this. Again, I know you're incredibly busy and podcasting all the time, so it's really awesome that you took the time to talk about these movies and watch 10 movies too. You know, I know that's not easy to find the time to watch 10 movies.
Yeah, I think that's the other reason I don't like to do a lot of guest spots, is because as much as I might go, I'm just going to, you know, breeze through this one. Especially with you, I couldn't do that. But in general, I find I just don't feel comfortable unless I dive in fully into the thing, you know? And yeah, so like I couldn't help myself. But it was a blast. Like all these are fun movies. So it was just like great to do, and I appreciate the invite, and it's always a pleasure, sir, to speak to you about movies. One of my favorite things.
Yes, mine too. Thank you so much. And everyone, make sure that you're subscribed to the Just the Discs YouTube channel and to Just the Discs and Pure Cinema on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again, Brian.
My pleasure, sir.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to F This Movie.